On September 16, 2022, 22-year-old Masa Jina Amini died while in custody of the government's morality police for wearing improper hijab. This sent shockwaves throughout Iran. A massive protest movement commenced in response as Iranians demanded justice for Amini and equal rights for women. My name is Sydney Martin, and I'm the program manager and a researcher here at the Iran 1400 Project. I recently conducted interviews with a variety of scholars about the woman life freedom movement. Here's what they had to say.
The most important change is the show of resistance on the part of Iranian society, in particular Iranian women, to show that, for example, the compulsory hijab, which is really a symbol of the whole oppressive apparatus of the regime, won't be basically tolerated. And of course, there have been observable changes. I mean, today, for the first time since early 1980s, it's a reality that tons of Iranian women are engaging in daily acts of civil obedience by not observing the hijab as the government wants it. Now, it's not an stable situation. It's not an achievement, if you will, yet. It's not it's not an entrenched achievement for the movement yet. Because, of course, at the same time that this is happening, there are thousands of people who are in jail. There are cafes every day that are being closed down because some women go there without hijab. And the government is very openly gearing up to suppress. But there's no doubt that it has been a step forward by showing the resilience of Iranian society, which we should remember many had thought that it was pretty subdued before 2022. It also has shown and really on a very international level one more time has laid bare the what I call the dual crisis of the Islamic Republic, i.e. its crisis of legitimacy and its crisis of competence, i.e. it has, in simpler words, it has shown it to be a deeply unpopular and incompetent government that has serious problems of not being accepted by large parts of its own population, including even large parts of its own elites. If you listen to the interviews and statements of people in various sort of elite positions in the last little while, you will see really a deep sense of lack of confidence in them. So, these are some of the main positive consequences of the movement. Now, what is the most important negative consequence, if you will? If we are honest with ourselves, the movement has once more shown the biggest winning card for the Islamic Republic and the biggest Achilles heel of the movement against it, which is a lack of an organized alternative. It has shown, if I speak sort of forthrightly, something of a political bankruptcy even of the groups abroad. They not only they failed to do what was necessary to build the alternative, the haphazard steps that were taken really led to a rather quick downfall. And if we need to be brutally honest with ourselves, if we are to have an honest assessment, frankly, this was a moment of truth. This was a moment of truth for the opposition groups abroad to see if they can conjure up a political alternative. And they failed to do even 5% of what is really necessary for this task. And this is also a challenge for those inside. The reality is that the strong, brave, courageous leaders of Iranian civil society, people like Narges Mohammadi, people like Ismail Bakhshi, and I can name many other names, but they are effectively they're very curtailed and by regime's oppression, and they don't have the ability to put up groups to be able to build a political alternative. So in a way, it has this movement has really shown what a tough task it is to want to overthrow the regime, even though it's so deeply unpopular, and even though it's so deeply incompetent. The movement has learned that it still doesn't have the strategies, the political vehicles necessary to bring a final blow to the regime. At the end, I should also note that, of course, events have also shown that diplomatic isolation of the regime will not by its own put an end to the regime, and that will always be relative, especially in the kind of new multipolar world that is emerging. We'll see that the Islamic Republic, while it's under heavy sanctions by the United States and many other countries, is still able to have diplomatic ties with many countries in the region, and even be tolerated by many Western countries, particularly those in Europe. So it really does. It really has laid bare both the incompetent and the lack of legitimacy of the regime, but also the very tough task of its opponents to be able to overthrow it. Well, I guess I talked about a bit of these obstacles, but so the obstacles for those inside Iran are very clear. It's that this regime is very well organized. It does have a very, I estimate that the real base of support for the regime is less than 10 or to 15% at most of the population. But a lot of them are very well organized. There are very important bodies. Now, any opposition can break this. Can break apart these organized forces. I don't think they're insurmountable, but it's also no easy task. There are tens of thousands of members of the IRGC and the Basij. If you count the affiliated organizations, actually hundreds of thousands, which is a small part of the Iranian population, but it is still a formidable force. So this is of course one of the main obstacles, that the regime is well organized. It is brutal. It is very. It doesn't break so easily. Ayatollah Khamenei, as a leader, has also shown he is not someone who breaks easily. He is not someone who gets on a plane and goes somewhere, and then he will fight till the brutal end. Now, of course, he's toward the end of his days himself. He's 80-something, so his death is probably the most important political event of the Iran in the next few years. But he will, so long as he's alive and he's in charge, despite all the mistakes that he's made, despite the ruin that he's brought to the country, he is able to preserve his power. The other important obstacle is the lack of organized political vehicles, and this is something again that I think many people are responsible for. We've been miseducated and misfed the idea. There are many wrong, erroneous, disastrous ideas that were popular and spread around since the beginning. One of it is the idea that you don't need a leader, that you can do things so-called horizontally. Oh, it's actually a great thing that they don't have a leader because you can't arrest the leader. I don't know what are some of the, I used already a couple of adjectives, but it's a crazy thing. It's the equivalent to a football team who thinks they have, come up with a new theory that they don't need a goalkeeper. And they also, keep spinning it around. Where in the world has ever been a meaningful political change without organization and without leadership? If 5 people decide to go to a restaurant together, they're unlikely to be able to do it without some direction. How can you overthrow a regime as organized that is the Islamic Republic? So not only we failed to have this political vehicle already, what should have happened is that this should have been built already. After all, Iranians rose in revolt in 2009. The 2009 generation failed to build a political vehicle. This is a very important task because they had every means of doing it. There was hundreds of thousands of them who left Iran. They worked in relatively free conditions. They could do it. They didn't. They built NGOs and human rights associations and other things, but they did not build political parties. And those of us who advocated building of these political parties and political vehicles were opposed at every turn because there was an aversion to political parties, as I said. Because of Iran's bad experience and past with the political parties, and this continues. So this is a lesson that has been brutally learned and will be learned again in Iran and in many other countries. That without a political vehicle, you cannot, you cannot change anything. Now, what a related fact to this is that if you are to build a political alternative and political vehicle, you need to be able to overcome differences. Iranians have proven at the moment of truth again, yes, we hate the Islamic Republic by and large, but can't agree on an alternative. Now we have many important differences. We don't even have a national figure, for example. If you look at the history of many countries, they have a national figure they can sort of rally around. In Iran, these figures who have this potential, whether it's the Shah, whether it's the Reza Shah, whether it's Mohammad Reza and Mossadegh, are deeply divisive. This is just a reality. Whether you like it or not, someone can say, no, actually, he's a national figure. Everyone should love him. But in the actually existing Iranians, these figures are deeply divisive. However, the idea that we can unite around a program for free and democratic elections and safeguarding of Iran's territorial integrity, a couple of minimum things, I think most Iranians do agree with that. So the challenge is to be able to say, okay, maybe we can disagree on a lot of other things, but agree on this couple of things and come together in political organizations. At the end, I should also just add that, however, not only we haven't had a, say, large group that gathers all opposition to the Islamic Republic, even proponents of particular camps have not done so. It's not like the leftists have one big organization which has a lot of members. It's not like Reza Pahlavi has been able to put together his followers in an organization. So not only there's this unity between different groups, there's even lack of organization inside groups. There's not one political group active in Iranian position today that has more than a couple hundred members. And that's a massive obstacle if you are going to change anything. No, I think it's an excellent question. Even though I pointed at it sort of negatively, if you will, as an obstacle, I'd like to address it positively. The 1979 revolution in Iran was made by those who wanted to really reject the existing models of the time, both capitalism and socialism, if you will, and offer a new way. They wanted to change everything fundamentally. The current revolutionary movement, if you will, the current thrust of the opposition movement in Iran is in a way a mirror opposite, i.e., this is in a way a return to the 1905-06 constitutional revolution, i.e., one in which we want to Iranians want to fight for the old demands of civil liberal rights, of democratic governance, and it is also, in a way, it has a sort of a contradictory or paradoxical reality to it, in which at the time where there's rise of authoritarianism in the world, Iranians are fighting for democratic rights. So you would think democracy is a normative thing. Everyone wants democracy, so it should be. So it's, in a way, it's a normal thing. But at the same time, as I said, because there's so much democratic backtracking around the world, puts Iranians in a tough spot. We were asking for democratization while it's on the backtrack, right? While it's not a priority, like it was, let's say, it really was in the 1990s, right? When they had the first reform movement in Iran in the late 1990s. 1990s was third wave of democratization. There were countries forming democracies right, left, and center. It really seemed to be, the history was supposed to end. As Francis Fukuyama said, it seems to be a march of democratization. Now, the conditions are very different. So, what does this mean for us is that, as I said, we need to be recognizant of these conditions, both globally and in relation to the history of our own country. And, I believe the key thing is for two things. First of all, understanding the importance of political organization, as I said, that different political camps need to learn a political culture. There was what the movement in the last few months showed was an important lack of a political culture. What do I mean by political culture? For example, if you support someone politically, doesn't mean you're supporting them to be your, leader in all affairs of your life. Doesn't mean you need to ideologically agree with them. But in politics, is effectively politicians are people who work for the people. Either those who are entrusted by part of a population for a particular goal. This didn't exist in conversations around political leadership, around the Mahsa coalition. The kind of conversation was not really the type of an advanced political culture. You can compare it to our neighbors, Turkey, which has had a parliamentary democracy for decades, to see the difference. Now, you can say, oh, Turkey reached this goal, didn't reach this goal, but it did show that it has a political culture, i.e. people come out and make meaningful political acts one way or the other, which was not true, unfortunately, for us. And it really, I believe it really showed itself around the whole debacles around the Mahsa coalition and how it came to be and how it collapsed and existence of other groups. So one thing is the political organizations and the political cultures. The other thing we need is a national consensus, as I said. We need to reach something of a national consensus of something that everybody says they accepted. What do I mean by everybody? I mean major opposition figures, polling, whatever Iranians, they say they want. We want an Iran that is undivided. That's important to many, i.e. its territorial integrity is kept intact, and that it will have democratic elections to decide who is going to form a government, and that it will also respect basic civic rights. Building a national consensus around this in sort of a dual process, when you build political organizations and you build national consensus around these values, and that you'll be as inclusive as you can. And this is, the inclusivity is not just a slogan to be nice. It's like, oh, be inclusive, it's like be vegetarian, be good. It's not. It's a important precondition for any political change, because Iran consists of many diverse people followers of different faiths, including no faiths, different attitudes to religiosity, different attitudes to our national history, different attitudes to our national institutions like the monarchy in the past. But they can come together if we accept that, okay, we have our differences, but we can have a national patriotic consensus of that we all love Iran and that we all want it to be democratic. And if we can get there, that will be really an important consequence of the woman life movement. By having laid bare what we lack, it could pave the way for us to get to what we need.